I call this regular meeting of the Village of Villa Park Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Roll call, Calvert,
Here.
Hofstra,
Here.
Jackson,
Here.
Lemieux,
Here.
Ludke, Orlowski,
Here.
Romano,
Here.
Schlinsky.
Here.
I too am present. With that, we have a quorum. First item we have is approval of minutes.
I make a motion to approve the
Questions or
minutes.
comments on the minutes before? No? Okay. I have a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Mike, seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. I'd like to make a motion to move agenda item 5 ahead of number 3. Is there a second?
Second that.
Motion seconded by Orlowski. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, any public comments on non-agenda items? Please, just come up and,
Thanks for changing the order for me. My name is Joe Amore, A-M-O-R-E, 309 East Maple Street. I serve on the Environmental Concerns Commission and in the Bike, Pedestrian, and Transit Subcommittee. So this is Bike, Pedestrian, and Transit Subcommittee. You're welcome. And this is not an action item on their behalf. Over my travels, I happened to go to a meeting in Wheaton. They have what's called a Bicyclist and Pedestrian Commission. And so we coordinate on some shared prairie path items and share information. And I was impressed with the fact that even though the governor's emergency order has been eliminated, they have worked out a process where they can have their commission meetings over Zoom-type access. So I emailed all the village officials that I had email addresses to concerning the fact that we should create a common space for all the commissions to be able to have that opportunity to better serve the public and to get more attendance. One of the things is that of course, the village and its diligence will not provide email addresses on their public-facing websites to the commissioners who aren't part of the village staff. So I made copies of that email. I'd like to pass it out here. I brought you an extra one for whoever's not here tonight. Basically, the email, is self-explanatory. It talks about what I proposed. I had contact with the City of Wheaton's clerk. They told me that all the information that was created to have this, ordinances, the work was done in-house, anything that we would need to assist us in setting something up, they would be happy to share with us. The picture on the first email on the page is a picture of their commission that had commissioners who were traveling in attendance and a member of the public who wasn't able to make it in person in attendance. The important thing, I guess, is the fact that they did it in-house and that they were able to write the proper ordinances so that it would be in compliance with Open Meeting Act. The second page is their agenda. It comes out every month, and then on that agenda, they also provide their Zoom access, and anybody who's been a Zoom moderator knows that you have control over content and who speaks, and it really works pretty well for them. So I was hoping to come to all the commissions this month, offer this as an option to let them know that it's something I've been encouraging the village to look into. I spoke about it at Coffee with the Board this month. I spoke it at the last village meeting, the board meeting. So if you get a chance, it's not an actionable item. I just wanted to bring it to your attention, and any further information that I gather, I'll be able to provide at a later date.
okay.
That's item 1. Item 2 is, I retired as a Metro conductor, and I've seen a lot of communities that have stations. And I've complained more than once about TIF 6 and what they need to do to build that up. And even in today's kind of like lower level building environment, you can still go to towns where you're seeing tower cranes building near their metro stations.
Tower crane?
Tower cranes.
Wait a minute.
Tower crane, like a crane that
Okay.
moves things around. Thank you. So we have that opportunity here in Village Park. I mean, if you could redo TIF 6, take down those low-rent apartment buildings on both sides of the tracks and redevelop that area where you can put a new business district, a new community where people still, like I said, as a Metro conductor, they're not working 5 days a week, but they need to be in person 3 days a week now. So that might be something that you guys might well look to, because we're sorely lagging behind in creating, new opportunities for residents, businesses. Metro is a long-sought item. I mean, they want to expand into counties that aren't even in the RTA transit district, so it's something you should look into. And then finally, third item, I'm about in the community a lot for some of my other duties, and I had a neighbor complain about the property at 8 West Terrace, and 8 Terrace, TERRACE, and from the front, everything looks fine, but there's some type of construction or something going on and that you can only see from the back of the building, and they've got a gigantic pile of wood leaning against the building. It looks like wood debris that they're just piling up, and it looks like it could be a fire hazard. And she says it's unsightly. She sees it from her backyard, and she was wondering if somebody could do something about it.
Yeah,
So
appreciate bringing that to our attention, and Mark here and Stephanie would definitely be the people that need to know that, so it's a
Okay,
good place to
thanks.
make it public.
Yeah, thanks. Well,
Yep.
like I said, thanks for moving the agenda around for me. I'm around. Justin knows how to get a hold of me. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, no, thanks.
You're
And
welcome. Thanks for
I'm sure the train station area will get quite a bit of focus in the comprehensive plan. And unfortunately, the development that's supposed to be going on there looks like has hit some snags. So hopefully, as a village, we can find our way through that.
Thanks. I brought it to someone's attention that when they put the new parking lot there on, what is it, Beverly? And they put the new parking lot in, but they never extended the sidewalk to the train station. It just ends into dirt. And I don't know whose responsibility that is, but we're going to make a formal mention of it at a next BP&T meeting. So we'll try to B, comma, P for pedestrian and T for transit. Thank you, you're welcome. So we'll bring it to someone's attention, and hopefully it can be resolved one way or the other.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks.
Thank you
folks.
very much.
You're welcome. Good night.
Yep, good night. All right, so the first item of business is, the only item of business actually, is PZ 2405, text amendments, Article 14, measurements and definitions, petitioner, Village of Villa Park. And we will start with staff input, and since the staff is the petitioner, that'll take care of the petitioner input too.
What? It's twofer. Good evening. Yes, so this evening, staff is coming forward with some recommended text amendments to our zoning ordinance, specifically Section 14.1 measurements. There's a couple of issues that we have noted that were just grammatical, spelling, some misnumbering of exhibits, wrong exhibit in a location where text was. So we're cleaning all that stuff up. But in addition to that, we're also removing some carryover from the previous zoning ordinance that got carried over to this one, eliminating those things, and then correcting how we measure building height and correcting the contextual setback on how that is supposed to be used appropriately instead of how it is currently. So it's all three things. It's typos, errors, and then moving forward with corrective changes that will grow the village, especially as we're doing second-story additions and regular additions of the like. So if you would like, I can go through the whole thing one by one or open it up for questions
Yeah,
on any
let's-
questions.
Seeing that there's not currently anyone here from the public, I'd say let's just walk through them one by one. If any questions come up, we can deal with them
Excellent.
one by one, and then if somebody from the public does come up, we can give them an opportunity to speak.
All right. All right, so I'm using the strike-through version, so I can see the changes that were made. And as you know, the Exhibit A is the clean version. At the end of all this, that's the exhibit to be recommended at the strike-through. First one, floor area, off-street, Everywhere else in the ordinance is dashed, here it's not. Setbacks, measurements, number 2, there's additional setbacks required on North Avenue, St. Charles Road, and Roosevelt. That's a carryover. When the MX district got approved, it is in direct conflict with those setbacks. We've got contextual setbacks. We're eliminating the OR district for contextual. There's only 4 areas in town that are OR, and they are not adjacent to any other OR district. They are their own entity. So there is no contextual setback because it's no vacant lots in the OR districts, nor do we see that that would be in the future. And then the very tiny one, but changes this, is the next one, where it's a strike through, striking setback and greater or. A contextual setback is traditionally when the home is placed closer to the road than today would be required. And so that when a new homeowner or new home developer builds on that infill lot, they have the ability to place that home 20 or 25 feet to get it in line with the homes that are closer. The way that it's written currently is that if the house was set back, say 50 or 60 feet back, they would also be forced to put it at 50 or 60 feet back and not at the 30-foot front yard setback as they are allowed per the bulk chart. So by eliminating the greater than, it actually falls into what a contextual setback is supposed to be doing. Under 14.1, that description does not define the image, so the strikeout of or that are separated from the subject lot by a street or alley. And then the exhibits were flipped. The correct one is on top, the strike through is on the bottom. So they're just in line, and you can see as the exhibits continue, they're all in the wrong location, so now they're all in the correct location. E, removed in its entirety. And then new E is in R districts. Any of the other language regarding greater than or OR is also removed. And then 14.14 was unnecessary. Onto the table of permitted yard obstructions, table 14.1. All of the C notes were removed, and it's just yes. And then at the very bottom, the actual notes are gone. That's also a carryover. Those notes are actually in the table, as you can see, on the far right column. References to patios and decks above 4 feet of ground level were removed. We could not figure out why that extra caveat was built into there, because we have decks that are above 4 feet everywhere. So I don't know how we were allowed to permit something if it was restricted to a deck above 4 feet.
Well, so this table is very new.
Mhm.
I think it came in with when Ellen was here.
Okay.
So the decks before, I believe what happened is there was a table, not quite as thorough as this one, but there was a table. When Consuelo was here and trying to get some text amendments done, there was quite a back and forth with the board, and things got broken up, and
Okay.
somehow in that process, the table actually got eliminated from the ordinance, even though it wasn't supposed to be.
Okay. From hearing the stories of what happened in the past, I could see how that happened.
Yeah,
Okay.
and then so, Ellen worked with, I'm trying to remember, I think Vasily and, who else? Somebody else over in the village to create this table, and they spent, I'd say at least a month or two, going through, looking at the old table that used to be in there, trying to decide what was current today, and then trying to decide if there were any standards that should be there that weren't. And my guess is, like, the 4 feet is kind of common in some places, because above that starts to become an obstruction of sorts. Especially, like, I know in Chicago, 4 feet is the number they use for open space. Anything above 4 feet can't be counted as open space in their rear yard open space requirement, for instance. So that's probably where that came from.
Could be.
But that would have been a decision made by Ellen and staff. So if you guys think it's unnecessary.
We do think it's unnecessary because we are reviewing permits for decks regularly that is above 4 feet just because of topography. You have a drop down in the back and they're doing a deck, and if it's above 4 feet, this restricts me from issuing that deck permit. But I also can't make them lower their door, so I'm caught. So the 4 foot did not seem beneficial, and there's nothing that the building code restricts from the height either. You can build a deck 20 feet in the air if you construct it appropriately. So we couldn't find anywhere between the building code or practicality that it made sense to keep the 4 foot ground level.
Okay.
A bunch of yes. There was a no C notes also, so we got rid of that.
Are you saying C notes?
C, yeah,
I mean, S, yeah.
SEE notes, correct. Yep.
It was like an Italian thing.
See notes like money.
$100 bucks. All right, and at the end of the table, you see the notes. Those are all struck out because those have been built into the table. So again, a carryover. And then we get down to building height. The way that the ordinance currently measures building height is from the top of curb out in the street to the building height of the structure. And that building height then is the highest point of a flat roof, the deck line of a mansard, or the mean of a hip gable traditional peaked roof, right? With the number of second-story addition permits that we are reviewing right now, there is no calculation on what the height of the curb is because it's not pertinent to the project. And so we're getting a plan set, of architectural set, that says finished grade to building height, and we do the review, and the first thing is, now go hire a surveyor and get a topo done to tell me what the elevation of the curb is that's approximately 40 feet from the structure that you're actually trying to construct. And that conversation does not go very well. And I also don't believe that the curb height is a true indicator of how high that building is, because it doesn't take into consideration the topography of the front yard. There's a gain, there's a drop. I believe, and this is what staff has written, that the building height is reflective of the grade that the building is at the front of the elevation. And so we have drafted this to remove top of curb in front of the building and added the finished lot grade at the horizontal midpoint of the front of the building. And we did not do 4 corners, we did not do the average, because we do have English, walkout, other conditions that they shouldn't be penalized for the front building height because of topography. Additionally, we added clarity that it is the mean level between the highest eave and the highest ridge for a hip, gable, or gambrel, those type of roofs. There has been interpretation on some architects that we've been working with that the lowest eave to the highest, because it's not clear. An eave is an eave and a ridge is a ridge. So you're supposed to calculate, this is 10% of the roof line is this level, and then the other 90% is this level, and then you do a formula, and we're trying to make it clear so that an architect can submit without the full topo that says, here's my base elevation, the building is this height, based on highest eave and highest ridge. And then get rid of the second caveat, well, if there no curve exists, let's measure it a completely different way. Yeah, and the rest of it is just the regular code, no additions. So, in summary, those are the recommended changes.
Okay. So on the roof height,
Yes,
highest eave and highest ridge,
yeah.
is that on the primary roof? When you start, if you have, or
Exceptions
let's
does not
say you have dormers. Is the highest eave the eave on the dormer?
Let's see, we have exceptions built into here. Hold on one second.
Because I think the highest ridge makes sense. Eve is what
Yeah.
I'm wondering about, though.
You're considering potentially that dormer eave being,
I'm not saying it
But-
should
no,
be, but
no,
I'm saying
right.
how somebody might
Right.
say, well, this is our highest eve here.
no, dormer is not contemplated, and it's not listed as one of the exceptions. That was not the intent, though. So, but I see how it could be built into it.
Yeah, I'm trying to see.
Highest eve for ridge, hip, cable to gambrel roof.
Let's see.
I'm just talking to myself now, don't do this.
So, measurements.
But isn't it dormer?
I mean, between the highest eve and the highest ridge.
Dormer's not the roof.
Yeah, go ahead.
I said if we're talking about roofs, a dormer is not a roof, and this specifically calls out ridge or eave for hip, gabled, and gambrel roofs.
Okay.
So I don't know if we could,
Is a dormer an architectural element, not the roof?
Because presumably the dormer would never, the ridge of the dormer would not be taller
Right.
or higher than the ridge of the actual primary
Right.
structure.
Equal at best, but shouldn't.
Sure, it could be equal, but does our code prohibit, expressly prohibit the ridge of the dormer being any higher than the ridge of the primary structure?
It doesn't, and that's why I was looking at the exceptions, that if they excluded the dormer, then it wouldn't even have to take that into the consideration for the calculation.
Because traditionally, the ridge of the actual house itself would be the tallest point.
Right.
As opposed to the dormer as an architectural design element.
Right.
Just to make it look.
Like chimney is an exception. We
Sure.
don't measure to the chimney, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Which, this is still open and fully vetted. If we want to add clarity, you guys can put dormer as an exception to then take it out of the equation for a roof on the motion. Because I don't want to measure from the dormer. It's a good point. I don't want that to be caught up. I want,
Yeah, we're talking about, what we're trying to clarify is we're talking about the primary eve on the primary,
Yep.
the highest primary roof, and then the highest ridge is always going to be the highest ridge. I mean, so that's kind of self-explanatory, but,
But it would seem to make sense to have the dormer as an exception, because it would raise the mean height unnecessarily.
Right.
And it would be restrictive to a homeowner.
Yep. Agreed.
Presuming that we don't get this crazy design where we've got a whole bunch of dormers throughout, placed on the house.
Looks like a crown.
Yeah.
so we would be adding
Under
dormers to
2B.
2B? Okay.
And I would put it, if you wouldn't mind, after chimney, before cooking tower.
Before what?
Cooking towers.
Cooking towers?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, do we need to put that into the motion, or can we just,
If we-
verbalize this to you now and,
As amended, right?
Yeah.
Motion as amended, and if you guys, if you want to
Yeah.
do a voice or something right now for that, that'd be fine.
yeah, and does anybody have any issue with putting dormer into,
No,
okay.
Putting dormer in.
Putting dormer into
Exceptions, Part B,
exceptions,
under 14.1.
2B.
2B.
Oh, 2B, sorry.
I'll put it on the
Yeah.
record.
Okay.
We are going to add the term dormer, D-O-R-M-E-R, between the terms chimney and cooking towers in section 14.1.10, A2, B.
Trying to visualize something with the setbacks.
Contextual?
Yeah,
What page are you on?
page 16,
Thank you.
the residential setbacks. I'm trying to remember if we have parts of the village where I feel like we do, but I'm not sure if they're incorporated or not, where entire blocks are set back more than would be typical.
Without infill?
Without what?
Infill, IN dash.
Well, I mean, they're currently developed that way.
There are,
Look south of Sugar Creek where I live,
Yeah, like the west side of Villa.
the west ones.
right, and so here,
North Avenue.
and so here's the catch, and we thought this one through, right?
Uh-huh.
That's where it is right now. And if there's a infill lot that wants to submit a permit, I cannot allow them to build at the 30-foot setback line. They have to be built at the greater contextual setback. Their neighbors that dictated that contextual setback at the same exact time can apply for an addition all the way up to that 30-foot front setback line because it's not an infill development. It penalizes the vacant lot.
I might interpret an addition as an infill development, personally.
As an in,
As an infill development, but I could see, I mean, I don't have a problem with what you're trying to accomplish. I'm just trying to visualize if there are places where it creates issues.
I think the only places that we have like that are in the unincorporated areas that we're required to have wells and septics.
Yeah, I mean, like, Summit south of Harrison is like that, but that's not in the village.
Look at Lane.
Yeah, the requirement,
Lane, Colbert Court.
what?
Colbert? Which one?
Lane
has
Drive,
that, Colbert Court has that, Riordan has that. All east of Villa Park. All east of Villa.
Yeah,
South of the Sugar Creek, east of Villa. I live there,
yeah.
It used to all be unincorporated.
but 22 years ago it was incorporated.
Yep.
yeah, by requiring a contextual setback to be greater than is required by the 30-foot front yard setback, you're forcing the backyards to be smaller on a fresh build as well, which obviously means that it's a longer driveway, it's more impervious surface, it's a higher cost. And you're committed to that without coming forward with a variation on every one of these. And we're seeing 8 new single-family homes last year. We only have infill lots, so that's 8 infill developments. And moving forward, we're expecting the remainder of them to get built out in the next 5 to 10 years. So this is the correction we want to make now, so we can continue citing those at 30.
Right, and obviously the contextual setback closer to the street is more common with what we have.
Okay, I was wondering if maybe you could clarify if there should be any notes on the sump pump discharge pipe extensions if it should be similar to the gutters or downspouts. Does the fact that there is no note for a sump pump discharge pipe extension, does that mean that you can put a sump pump pipe extension as far out as you would like in the front and the rear and in the side? And should there be, I would think, especially if a person has a rear yard abutting their side yard, that they might not want that sump pump discharging into their backyard or into their side yard.
Sure. So for clarity, the sump pump discharge pipe extension, a yes in the front, which means that, yes, it can go beyond the 30-foot setback,
Yes,
right? No on the side yard, so it can only go up to the 5-foot mark. So that's 6-foot mark, so it cannot be closer than 6 feet to the property line. And then again, yes, in the rear yard, it can go up to 5 feet from the rear, so you can go all the way back. Keep in mind, though, there still is the stormwater ordinance that says you cannot push water onto a neighboring property, which still applies, which doesn't have anything to do with zoning.
okay, so, because that would be a concern
Right.
to,
Absolutely. That's a different authoritative arm I don't have. That's our engineers.
okay, thank you,
This was the idea to get it away from your foundation.
yes.
Okay, I did have another question that you just reminded me of. That, with swimming pools and sports courts,
Yeah.
I see we're striking the including decks and paved areas and all that. Is that simply because you don't think it's necessary because the existing setback requirements should make
Decks-
that so?
Decks and paved areas have their own requirements. It
Okay.
doesn't need to be specified under swimming. pool.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that was the case, because I know Ellen had a specific, and that may be why this language is in here.
Oh.
She was fighting a specific issue at the time where someone had already installed their pool, their in-ground pool, and their, I don't know if they had installed the concrete deck or started to, or tried to pull a permit to, and the pool was like 5 feet from the property line. And they wanted to concrete all the way to the,
Some people want things they just can't have.
They already had the pool and they applied for the concrete.
Yeah.
so that
that's
may be
because-
why that was in there, but I just wanted to make sure
Yeah,
that,
no, it's
that we
because-
weren't pushing pavement closer.
No.
Good.
It has its own section. It doesn't
Yeah.
need to be reiterated in another section.
That's what I thought.
Yep.
I don't think I have any other questions. Anybody else have any other questions, comments? Anything that,
Can
They
you
don't understand.
reiterate the rationale for striking figure 14.4?
14, oh, sure.
Because I see like the demonstrative examples and and I understand the rationale for including figures 14.1,
Yep.
14.2, and 14.3, but it seems as though 14.4 is being stricken.
Because it is the same as 14.3. You only use the two to the left or to the right if you're at an intersection, a corner lot. That particular one, 14.4, created confusion by saying you go this block or this block if you're the corner. But it's not, because then it's, one is your side yard, which it clearly says you don't use. You only use the front yard as your calculation. So it created a potential conflict for future interpretations. 14.3 tells us what we actually need.
So only utilizing what is detailed as the street yard depth.
Street yard.
Depth? Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
because contextual setback only applies to the front. It never applies
Not
to
to
the
the
side
side.
street yard.
Okay. And then the note on the 20-foot setback in our districts, was that, I see that's written, it seems like that's written in as opposed to being left in from you striking elsewhere.
I struck the whole thing, which you'll notice midway through that, it says
Yeah.
20 foot, and I just rewrote it for clarity because it's in an R district.
Okay.
It's the same number, not changing
Just,
the number.
but just rewritten because it didn't formulate the correct way.
It's pretty ugly.
Okay.
It's like, struck, took the words I needed.
Yeah,
Kept it.
out of F, now E.
Mhm.
Okay.
Correct. So as a note, that's a good point. No bulk chart numbers are changing in any of this stuff. So if it was 20, it's still 20. The building height is still
28.
28. It's just how do we calculate it? So the bulk chart has not been discussed in this, and that's why it's only 14.1, not subsection 2 or 3. So, just for clarity, we're not changing the actual distances or heights.
Anything else, Justin, or anybody else?
Not on that one. Not sure if we need to open or invite conversation on the potential striking of the 4 feet above ground level for the decks. But I do appreciate the cleanup of the removal of the C notes and then just indicating and revising a few of, must be back at least 5 feet as opposed to a percentage. And yeah, you did a very clean job.
So you're wanting to have a conversation about whether decks over 4 feet should be permitted or whether there's,
I'm just, given the history, is striking it, does this commission feel comfortable striking it? Or do we want to include the condition of no more than 4 feet above ground level?
express to me what situation you're trying to avoid. I think I know, but I just want you to say it.
Trying to be diplomatic about this.
You don't have to be specific, just,
I see it as a potential safety issue, so if we do want the open decks, with just the two conditions of must be set back at least 5 feet from the side lot, must be set back at least 5 from the rear lot line, the removal of the condition of the no more than above 4 feet, I just want to ensure that that is not going to invite safety hazards for our residents.
building code requires railings above a certain height, correct? And what is that height?
2 steps.
What is it?
2 steps. Anything with 2 steps requires a handrail and then full railing around it, which is obviously less than 4 feet.
But I do think you're visualizing, and they're only permitted in the rear yard. But I could see you potentially visualizing a deck, like, if I was to build a deck off the back of my house,
You
It
would be
would-
over 4 feet.
probably be 6 feet up.
And that's the problem we're
6 to
coming with
8.
as people tear down their 25-year-old deck, and I'm trying to issue a permit. But now it's a structure that's been removed, and I have to permit it per what I'm allowed, and that's 4 feet. That's a problem.
And then dropping that down, for example, 2 feet from 6 to 4, and then having to then build a staircase up to whatever the
Door.
point of ingress and egress is.
From his door,
Could create even more of a safety hazard than just having the deck be
Correct.
6 feet where that door is already at.
correct, because the ledger is supposed to attach to your joists in the home, not to a couple of studs that are a foot below your ledger. It's a construction problem, right? It's a constructability issue, that if we're forcing it to be at 4 feet, we're just arbitrarily connecting the building, which, through the building code, is going to be built to today's standards, not what we've seen in the past. It doesn't make sense.
Is deck defined in our ordinance?
We're gonna do a definitions zoning text amendment later in the year. That if it isn't right now, it will be. We don't think that it is. I'm
Okay.
going
I
to-
just
we-
confirmed.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Okay. I think what Justin's trying to avoid is a situation where the deck becomes something approaching a balcony. Like visually. I mean, or in terms of like height, both, maybe in terms of safety.
Yep.
But, if there's no limit,
Mm-hmm.
then what's to stop somebody from building a deck off of the back half of their split level at 6 or 8 feet and calling it a deck
Sure.
instead of a balcony and filling up all the backyard that they can and creating an 8-foot overhang to their neighbors? Will that happen?
Yeah,
Probably not, but probably it
that would be
could.
my question. If you take this limit out, somebody wants to do a deck that connects every story of their house and multiple overhangs, they can. There's really no limit
Yeah,
once this is out.
right. From a construction standpoint, there is no difference between a balcony or a deck. They are constructed the same exact way. There is no building code that says a balcony can't have posts, for example. Juliet balcony that's hanging off the side, right? Or that it has to be suspended. They're all the same thing, which is why we have to do the interpretation internally when we talk with people about deck versus balcony.
Right.
We all know what we think we see what a deck is, right? We all think we know what a balcony is. And the next round will be adding additional definitions to actually say what those things are. But we're issuing decks or reviewing decks right now that are
Yeah.
4.5, 5, 6 feet, because that's where their rear door is.
Yeah. No, and I understand the practical difficulty,
Yeah.
so to speak, of requiring everyone in that situation to seek a variation, especially when replacing a deck.
It was tied to patio also. And they were both there. Patios and terraces no more than 4 feet above ground level. The same exact language for deck and patio, and we could not figure out how patio was tied to that at all. And so,
Yeah, that'd be a lot of concrete.
exactly, yes.
But,
So
That
we
may
just,
be your definition ambiguity with that too, as they were just covering the basis. Right.
yeah.
Excuse me, can I have a minute?
Yeah, please, take a minute.
My sister's husband passed away last night.
oh,
Sorry to hear.
Sorry to hear that.
And I put her on a flight tonight and she can't find the boarding pass.
No problem. Those are the kind of things you need to take care of. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, she's not in good shape.
I think as long as we're working on definitions for the deck and the balconies, as long as I have no problem with
Yeah,
that.
What is our minimum side yard in a standard R district?
6 feet.
6 feet. So I think what people would be trying to avoid is a situation where you have a deck that's 8 feet off the ground, 6 feet from your property line, 10 feet off the ground, and then, like coming off of basically
I'm just trying to visualize, yep.
yeah, so it becomes essentially a structure for your neighbor next door. So all safety aside, it starts to become like as if somebody built a pergola or something, It's just avoiding the potential for that happening somehow without hamstringing you with the existing situation.
So there's no square footage limitations on deck, nothing,
There's still,
Comparatively
there's
to the
still lot
property.
coverage. Deck falls under lot coverage calculations, so you can't deck your entire backyard. There's still a limit on that, but there's not a square
There's,
footage maximum for,
Projection
where you at?
maximum for decks. Oh, no. Just kidding.
So,
Took it off.
It follows similar setbacks, side yard. Yeah.
I agree. I think 4 foot is limiting in a lot of circumstances, and it is better to hit that door level than anything else, but I don't think anybody wants a 3-story or 2-story deck. Again, that wouldn't do the yard coverage problem, but you
Yeah.
have,
And we aren't seeing that permit come through. We are seeing the, I need to replace my deck, and
Yeah.
it's at more than 4 feet.
Do you think maybe this was meant for those folks that have freestanding decks that don't have guardrails on them? I've seen a few of those around town, and we're interpreting it differently.
We did issue a couple of permits last year for a deck that was in the yard that was not attached to an additional structure. Those were mounted off the ground by this much. And maybe that's what it was for, but I don't know that it got what whoever wrote that intended.
Do you need to deal with that? Please, yeah. We're going to recess for what, five
Yep,
minutes?
Being her boarding.
Yeah, we'll recess for 5 minutes.
Thank you.
No problem.
No problem. gonna bring this back to order. So we were discussing the 4 feet. I guess I don't have a problem striking it. I just want to make sure that we make additional ordinance changes. We look how to avoid
Sure.
those types of situations, whether it's, I don't know the best way to do that, but
My commentary was such that for the aspect of keeping the spirit of what a deck is, along with the safety measures, and I understand the handrails, and I appreciate you bringing that to our attention, putting that on the record. I just don't want people to abuse the terminology of a deck and have it be a deck in name only,
Sure.
and not actually fulfill the spirit or the purpose of what it should be, as either, from the supermajority of them, as an exterior attachment to the house, in very few circumstances, an actual like standalone deck, presumably in like the center of a yard itself.
I understand.
And I wonder if the 4 feet might have come from the Chicago zoning ordinance, because I was looking at our definition of height, and I thought, I know Chicago has the same conceptual thing, so let me go look at the language, how they deal with it, and it's the identical language, word for word.
Copy.
So that may be,
So,
and I know Chicago uses 4 foot for their definition of rear yard open space. So a deck 4 feet or lower counts as rear yard open space they have a specific rear yard open space calculation. Anything above 4 foot does not count as rear yard open space. So if you have a deck at 6 feet or on the roof of a garage or something like that, you'd have to get a variation from the rear yard open space to count that towards that may be where that came from. I don't know.
yeah, if the language was identical, yeah, let's
Yeah.
go with that.
All right, anything else?
So as you see, the last one, the recommendation is just to call out Exhibit A as, that's the clean version with all the red lines with the as amended.
Yeah, as amended. Whoever makes that motion. Yes, we want to
Yeah.
do that as amended.
Right. I make a recommend approval of PZ-24-05 or a zoning ordinance text amendment as outlined in Exhibit A as amended.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second, any questions or comments on the motion? Okay, roll call. Calvert,
Yes.
Hofstra,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Lemieux,
Yes.
Orlowski,
Yes.
Romano,
Yes.
Schlinsky.
Yes.
I too vote yes. With that, our recommendation passes to the village board. All right, any items for discussion?
We will have a meeting next month. We're going to be doing notifications here shortly.
Okay.
It's the 11th.
Any commissioner comments,
I have-
questions?
I have an item that I'd like to talk about, and that's with some of the things that we've done in the last 15 years, with the new business on Villa Avenue, the Captain's Room, and the no parking. I've done a lot of communication with residents, asking questions. So what I would like to do, because I want to see more new business, I would actually like to make a motion or something to the village staff to where we can look at removing any parking restrictions to any of the other businesses within those districts. And get better development, more development, and then get the village to actually come up with a parking garage so that we can continue with new business.
So you would like to see the village remove any property-specific restrictions on the parking on the street? Is that what you're saying? I'm not following
No,
entirely.
as far as
Lot parking at the businesses.
the businesses have parking restrictions. And if we're going to allow a business to go in there and have no parking requirements, period, and just say, well, I'm going to valet park all my cars, then why would we have restrictions on a neighboring business or a business across the street that, oh, well, no, you have to have a parking plan, but he's going to valet? So why don't we just remove all the parking restrictions and then have the village, somewhere along the line, actually build a parking garage, whatever you'd like to call it, so that none of the buildings are restrained to, oh, well, I can't do this because I don't have enough parking.
I'll let Mark speak to this mostly, but I know we're working on a parking study.
Correct. And that's why I bring it up,
And
because,
something that Ellen had mentioned, and I know some villages do, which is a fee in lieu of parking. I'm not saying that's the answer, but there could be ways of dealing with that short of lifting all parking restrictions in the district.
when I know
You might need to revisit them.
right, the village is working on a parking plan, and I think this should be welcomed into the whole factor of, as far as the whole parking study in those areas, but not make it to where the business owners are restrained by, oh, well, you've got to have 40 spots or 50 spots, and make it to where, like all the other towns, we have a parking garage, and then you walk from the parking garage to the businesses. And I think we would get more business in redevelopment to those areas if we could
And-
do that.
And fee in lieu of parking is something that some municipalities have done to, basically, if you don't want to supply the parking, you pay X amount of money into a fund that pays to create parking in that district. That's one, there are multiple ways to go about it. That's one.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit on the.
Yeah.
So as Mike was talking about, is that the village is working with KLOA, the transportation and parking firm, to do a parking study for the Villa Avenue downtown area and then the Ardmore Avenue downtown area. So we're doing two of them. Staff is in review of the final draft document, not the final doc yet, but the final draft document. So we've seen some of the preliminary numbers, some of the preliminary recommendations, and that kind of stuff. And what it's showing on the Villa side right now specifically is that there is enough parking stalls, actual spaces in that particular area. It's just that certain ones are being underutilized, and we're showing that they're not being utilized because nobody knows where they are. There's no signage, there's no direction, there's no public parking this way, there's no digital map, there's no Google map that says, oh, public parking lot. What we see is the couple of stalls on Villa that are full because they're directly in front of the other businesses, and unless you know where to go, you don't know where to park. Couple lots are full, and they get full, but then the museum lot, the lot across the street across from Villa Park, empty. And we did Saturdays and Thursdays. So we did the prime times for the calculations similar to a traffic study. We did the parking study. So we're finding that some of the recommendations are going to be sign it, map it, so that when people say, I want to go to Moore Brewing who don't live here, and they can also see the parking lot is one block down, you actually enter that parking lot in your GPS instead of Moore Brewing. So those are
You
the
actually enter the.
parking lot in the GPS instead of Moore Brewing.
Instead of more brewing?
He's talking about a specific.
MORE,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a,
Oh.
Yeah, capital M-O-R-E.
Okay, gotcha.
yeah.
So, and then what, again, follow-up is that with the one particular business that's coming in right now, You can do a fee in lieu on new developments, but we don't have new developments in there. These are 100-year-old structures where businesses are trying to go in and out of, and the only way for them to meet their parking requirements is to start demolishing to make a literal parking lot. There's a song about it. So, what we're working with is how do we meet some of the recommendations in these parking studies to encourage businesses to come in and out of here knowing that there's enough public parking to meet the demands.
Yeah, and the fact that we have enough parking there, despite what specific businesses might feel,
Right.
is something I've always said and argued for, and that's why finding the best way to deal with that is important, because we have these MX districts and we have this historic context that we want to preserve, and the whole point of that is to avoid, I'll just, without calling, we don't want the 7-Eleven effect, right? Where you have a park, and I'm not, no specific 7-Eleven in Villa Park, but where you have the convenience store set back an aisle row of parking from the street. Because if that's the kind of development you got on, say, Villa or Ardmore, because they felt they needed 6 parking spots.
That's what you get.
It destroys the
jeopardizes
character.
design. By forcing that number in there, it does jeopardize your design. It forces you to fit that parking on there.
Yeah, and I know that when we did the zoning ordinance update, we did stress that we wanted to try to be less parking intensive, because that's the way, a lot of business districts are moving, and the parking requirements of 1960, when it was park everything,
Yeah.
curb to curb, are not really in municipalities' best interest anymore.
I agree. And so what we're probably going to see is those 2 reports, because they're basically twin reports, get finalized, presentation to you guys from KLOA, and then additionally a presentation on the findings to the village board. And then staff will be taking action items based on those 2 reports, which will end up being most likely a additional zoning ordinance text amendment regarding parking and potentially parking design as well.
Yeah, and I'm a firm believer that for your downtown, I don't care what your downtown model is, on a Saturday afternoon or a Friday night, a driver, a visitor to the area should have to circle.
Yeah.
Once, maybe twice,
Okay.
but be able to find a parking spot.
Yep.
Not park in front of whatever business they want
Right.
anytime, day or night. I know business owners would disagree with that, but as a planner, that's,
And my response to that is that there's only one stall in front of the business.
Right.
Because it's a street. It isn't a parking lot. I can't make more parking on the street. It is what it is.
and some of those businesses do have parking behind them, but they use them for their employees.
Or the apartment above, correct?
Or, right, yeah. All right.
I'm curious, because the nature of where you work with Chicago, how
Yeah.
do they, in little neighborhoods, Southport, like those areas where it's all business front and it's only street parking, like, what does the ordinance work for those businesses?
So,
I mean, is there a definition of a kind of downtown
yeah,
street
like,
front businesses? They're just not going to have
in
lots.
some zoning districts, there's almost no parking requirement. There's, for almost all use types, there's a minimum square footage before you trigger any parking requirement. Like, as an example, even a branch bank at 3,800 square feet, you don't have to supply any parking.
Have to what?
You don't have to supply any parking. Above 4,000 feet, then the calculation, 4,000 square feet, then the calculation kicks in. In Chicago specifically, a little over a year ago, they actually expanded what they already have. They have, it's not as big of a deal as here, because we don't have the kind of transit that they do, but they have what they call transit-served locations. Transit-served locations. And within those, like, there are situations, certain development types, where you can go to 100% parking reduction. And it might require administrative adjustment, but 50% as of right. And that's within a certain range of various types of transportation, specific bus lines, all train stations. About a year ago, they ratcheted that up even more. They expanded the zoning districts that you can do it in. They doubled the radiuses of all the transit. So they went from a quarter mile of a train station to a half mile of a train station. They went from, I think, like 15 or 20 bus lines to basically every major bus line.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of things that get done in the suburbs, or that were done in the old suburbs, that even in the city of Chicago 30 years ago, that they're fighting now to reverse. Like, I know I talked about it when we were doing 27 West Park, but they continue to shrink drive aisle width. Drive aisle width, because it slows traffic. It's safer for pedestrians. When you have curb cuts on the sidewalk, it's less of a negative impact just on your sense of being on a street. Like, they want one-way traffic at like, one-way curb cuts like 12 to 14 feet on the street. Two-way drive aisles are 22 feet, sometimes 20, depending on the parking. And they continue to squeeze those because they've recognized the need for green space and the need to just generally slow traffic and create more pedestrian-friendly environments, even in parking lots which aren't traditionally very pedestrian-friendly. But if you can green them up and slow cars, they're not terrible. And I'm not saying all those things will reach the suburbs, but those are the kind of things that they've done to, because we think of Chicago as being the city, and it is, but in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, and in the early 2000s, they were starting to get a lot of the big, your Targets and the Giants shopping centers, and even just horrible mid-80s strip malls, the kind that we don't like here either. And now in 2024, 40 years removed from that, 30 years removed, they're fighting to reverse all of that. The Jewel parking lot effect, you know?
Radiator.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, so just to add on, I mean, we have a built environment with completely viable, good business storefronts with a parking requirement makes it difficult to keep those going. So that's why the last couple that have come in have been all under a non-conforming parking status. Only were they building something new did they have to apply for that variation for the reduction. But the existing ones can move in and out even though it's all under the guise of non-conforming. But generally what we're talking about is eliminating parking minimums. That's what the phrase is. If you look up the planning people's parking minimums, eliminating parking minimums, and that's what Mike's talking about. It's a trend that's happening. Champaign has done it as well for their downtown areas most recently.
And
Same idea. If you think about Green Street or their downtown, it's very, very similar.
it's been my experience that any savvy business model, your national chains, your regional chains even, they know what their parking requirement is. And you might say the minimum is 10, but if they need 12, they're going to give you 12. And if they're one that has, that might need that overflow, like I have a client now who's fighting with the city who wants them to provide less parking, and they refuse. They don't have to, as of right, they could provide up to what they're providing, but the city's like, we would like to see you provide less parking because you're providing more than we think you need. And they're like, no, we need all of this.
Corporate says I need this,
Yeah.
otherwise I can't build, and I understand that as well, so.
Yeah.
I am still intrigued by the concept of the fee in lieu, and I think that's worth exploring.
Sure, on a new build?
Yes.
Absolutely. it'd be weird to have to charge a fee in lieu every time we get a new CO for a new, same address on
No,
over.
for a new build.
Give me that money. But yes, new build, ground up, yeah, that's definitely something we can look at, and it may end up being actually a recommendation in the report.
I welcome to see that report.
Yeah. Wrapping it up, the final draft is on my desk for review right now for Ardmore, so.
Can we include Central and Park into that too, eventually?
The parking on Central and Park that is a part of those nodes is included, yes.
Okay,
Yeah, it's not just Villa, it's the Villa corridor
okay.
area, right? Ardmore, Park, Central, up to the library, down to Highland.
Okay.
There's maps in there, you'll see it all.
Anything else?
Any updates from prior applications that may or may not have been approved by the village board that were there larger projects? Ecoterra, Park,
Sure.
27 West. Any updates on those that
Both Knollcrest and 27 West Park, which is now known as Ardmore Flats, are both in for permit review.
are? Okay.
So they're moving forward.
Within the confines of the variations
Yep,
that they've
yep,
previously been
Yep,
approved?
correct.
Okay.
Yep, they're working within the rules that they have been delivered. The village has officially issued a notice of default to the developer for Ecoterra. So that is out there, and they are now on the clock for cure.
Sad news.
Cure, C-U-R-E, cure. C-U-R-E, cure. Yeah, sorry.
Sad news, sad news.
Okay. And then the union?
They got an extension to their letter of intent.
Correct. And then they have formal submittal in our review right now. What are we anticipating for planning zoning? April? Yeah, they're slated, not notified yet, but slated for the April 11th planning and zoning for their new ask, which is the 7-story original concept plan type.
Okay.
Couple tweaks on the design after we reviewed it that we're looking at doing, so, that's at 7. We have an associated performa and RDA that we're doing on the side, that's not part of you guys, but it's all a cohesive project that'll eventually go to the village board.
And I would just say I'm glad for the mild winter we have and the speed with which our 2 park projects are
Yes,
advancing.
yes.
Anything else? I move that we adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.